Well, do you remember some kind of experience about fire on the property, like someone had a vision?
Yeah, a lady across the street. She was sitting on her porch, and she says, we hear about experiences and stuff. She says, but I've never had one. But she said, I saw balls of fire come out of heaven and roll all across this property and then go back up in the heavens. And she says, that was a special blessing.
Wow.
And I thought I should tell you.
Mm-hmm. That's so cool.
She told us the ground was purified.
Last episode, Sister Dee shared about how God opened the doors for her family to serve as missionaries in the San Carlos Apache Reservation. Today she wraps up with a few more memories and some life advice she has learned over the years.
When did you guys start doing Vacation Bible School?
Vacation Bible School, we started in '89 when we moved back. We were actually gone from here for a total of 15 years.
Okay.
They had a program where the church was doing another minister coming in every 2 years, would be a different minister. And so during that time we moved to California and lived over there. Well, when we came back, Tina came with us, our daughter Tina.
So this is what, fourth child or fifth?
Tina was our fifth child.
Okay.
She came back with us, and she worked with the children. She's we need to do Bible school. We need to start Bible school. So the first year was 1990, the summer of 1990, because we moved back in 1989. We did Bible school. She wrote the program, did the crafts, she did everything. The whole thing she put together. We had like 80 kids, and we just had the little church building.
Yeah, it was a lot smaller than this. It was a lot smaller than this room, huh? I never thought about that.
Half of the kitchen. And every day a teacher would quit. We'd have to beg them to come back the next day. It was so hard because we had such a vast from 5 years old to 12 years old, and with 80 kids in just that little part.
Yeah. Wow.
And then they had the dining room, divided up. We tried to do classes. This was trial and error, and so we had. We did pack lunches for the kids, and we had so many that the boys, when we left California and came back over, we had a construction company over there. The boys took over the company, and so they sent us the money the first year to buy the food to give the kids the sack lunches. Well, we needed more, so we had to call them and say, could you give us some more money? we need more.
There was more kids than you expected?
Yeah.
Wow.
So every night we would pack lunches. Well, we found out what happened too was that the kids came without eating in the morning, and what they did, they had school lunches, school food. When they got to school, they had breakfast, and then they had lunch at school. So at home, they only got dinner. So during the summer, at home, they only got dinner. So they came to Bible school, most of them.
Pretty hungry.
Most of them were hungry. So we had to have a snack for them and juice. When they came in the morning, we would give them a snack and juice. We needed more money, so we called the boys and asked them if they could send us some more money. We could have that. So that was the first year. And so Dan prayed and that we needed help. We needed money for Vacation Bible School. And so God revealed to him that we should write letters. So we wrote letters of what we were doing with the Bible school, and we sent a letter to everybody that told us, if you ever need help, let me know. Or if there's anything we can do, let me know. Well, there was a lot you can do. And so we sent out the letters and sponsor a child.
Wow.
And so much a child. And so we would get anywhere from $5 to $100. They sent out. Well, we weren't supposed to solicit from the church, so we couldn't solicit from the church. But like if Jared would get the letter and say, "Oh, MBA should help with this. Let's get our MBA to help this, or let's get our Sunday school to help this." So one of the members would get the Sunday school or the MBA to help and send out. So, and we got money, so then we would buy the stuff for the crafts, the stuff for the lessons, the food that we needed. And when Bible school was over, we would have maybe like $3 left or $4 left in the account. It was always just enough money to get through. So it always worked out every year that it was just enough money to get through.
You guys have been here for VBS before, right? It's still up until what I think 2019 is the last time we did it. Is that right? And
2018.
When did come?
2018?
That's when we were there.
We were there, yeah.
So interestingly enough, when we were pulling out, Anna was very...
Did you drive here today?
No. That year, 2018, which we ended up getting married that upcoming year. She had moved to Florida, all that. When we were leaving, Anna was very distraught about leaving. And she told me... how did you word it? We're going to live on a reservation one day. We're going to live on a reservation one day, just like that. And I'll tell you what, it scared me a lot.
Yeah.
So, but it's funny how over the span of 6 years, God changes your perspective, and He knows how to get your attention and reveal things to you.
Our journey, when we both came here that year, we were on a break. And
Like in your relationship.
when we came to that Youth in Action, we were on a break and we were engaged. And when we left here, we were engaged again.
Yeah. Well, I remember the two of you visited with Dan, and it was such a blessing because that, like I said, we always went. Dan and I always went to the old people. We would go to all the old brothers and sisters. We would go in. I'd be so excited because we were going to go to Cleveland. Cleveland was a big city. It's a little two-lane highway to get there now. I mean, you can probably get there in a half hour now. Back then, it took you forever to get there. But Friday night, he'd come home from work, and dinner would be right on the table, ready to go. Because as soon as we were eating, I wanted to go because we were going to go to Cleveland, and we would go in. We'd visit with Brother Rock and Sister Ange Biscotti. These are our old brothers and sisters. Brother Pete and Sister. Madeline Ranieri, old brother and sister Thomas, all the older ones, we would visit. And then a lot of times we would go back on Saturday because it was something that needed repaired at their house, and Dan would have to go and repair it and take care of it for them, So here I am waiting for our time to come because Dan was sick now, and we're old, I'm old now, but... I mean, I didn't consider myself old then, but I was getting old. But we were older, and the young people weren't coming to visit us. And Dan used to always say, "Well, what goes around comes around." So I was waiting for the comes around for us because, we wanted, like the brothers would come up to visit, and was for church or something, but hardly any sisters came. And there was no, we didn't have a lot of, just, in the early years here we did. We had a lot. A lot of people came, because it was a new work. They traveled by car back then, and so they would stop here. We had a lot of company in the early years, but in the later years, it seemed like it slowed down. Everybody flew everywhere, so this was out of the way, and it was usually the ministers that came up to help with the service, and there wasn't a lot of the extra company, like just come and have a cup of coffee and just sit and chat. Right. There wasn't any of that, and I missed that. And but you guys come in and you just sat there and visited with him, and you don't realize. I didn't realize until then how much it meant for us to be there visiting the old brothers and sisters back then.
Wow.
It was a blessing to us because we were hearing their experiences, and we wanted to grow that way and learn from what they had gone through and things. So it was helpful for us, but I didn't realize how much it meant to them
until you were in that position. Do you guys remember any stuff you talked about back then? Or I know it was like 6 years ago.
No, I literally, that was the first thing I said today when we were driving here.
Yeah.
I said, I had an opportunity. I always talk about it because that experience impacted me personally, listening to how they ended up here. And so for Anna and I, again, 6 years ago, where we're at right now, there was no connection at that time, knowing that we were going to end up in San Benito. But I'll tell you, God knows what he's doing. And those little seeds of just hearing, every time I fast and pray, I think about your husband going off into the wilderness and you preparing soup for him. Yeah. And I think about it every single time. And I always would tell Anna, I got to try that one day.
Yeah. He would go up and fast and pray. And it'd be like 3 or 4 days with nothing.
Wow.
Bible and Book of Mormon in the car. And they call him game warden, I think, would stop and see him, make sure that he was okay, because he would be up there in the mountains just up there fasting and praying.
Yeah.
And we had a CB radio, and there was one spot coming down from the mountains, coming down that road, that he could, if he stopped at that spot, he could tell me that he was on his way home. Other than that, there was no connection. So when he left here, there was no connection until he was on his way home. And he would stop and he'd say, I'm on my way home. I'll be there in about 20 minutes. I'd get the soup on.
Yep. Cool. I remember that story.
Yeah, because he couldn't eat heavy, but he had to have something. He had to have a little nourishment. So he'd come in and he would get the soup that was nourishing him, and then little by little. By the next day, he was eating pretty normal, but the first day back, he just soup.
The another thought that came to my mind when Ammon went to King Lamoni, and he submitted himself to them as a servant, and he really magnified as a servant leader and was there and all that. What I always think about, which I think I get this vibe when I listen to brothers and sisters who have given themselves to this work all these years, is that nobody talks about Ammon being at a birthday party with the people, or funerals with the people, or weddings, or just the cup of coffees with the people, because he didn't see his brothers for 13 years. So my question, I guess, kind of that I think about is, how do you get all this attention from the church, but then there's real life. How do you manage that, and kind of how is it different from the perspective of others versus real life here on the reservation and working for the people and crying with the people and laughing with them?
Well, for me, it was, I had my children. This was home. So whether this is home and there's poverty around us, or whether I'm living in a city where there's poverty around me, I have my home. This is it. We were a unit. We didn't have all the luxuries and things that other people were at that time beginning to get. But look how many of them out there didn't have anything either. Mm-hmm. It wasn't that we were living on a reservation. We could have been poor, living amongst millionaires. I mean, it didn't really matter as long as we had God and our family together. And that's what it was. The early years, having my children was what kept me going. I was lonely. I didn't have my mom. My mom and I were really close. We did our grocery shopping together. They'd have dinner at our house. We'd have dinner at their house. I mean, we were together a lot. Dan and my dad, they went fishing. They went hunting. They worked together building. I mean, we were a unit back there. So when we left, I took everything they had, my brother was killed in an automobile accident 3 years before we left. So I was the only child left. My 3 boys were the only grandchildren that they had. But they supported us 100%. And, you know, it was just, we were here. We had our kids. And that was, sometimes I cleaned like you wouldn't believe, because I needed something and I didn't have it. I needed my mom there and I didn't have her. So I would clean and I'd hum as I'm cleaning. I'm humming a song. And who knows what it would be, you know, but it would be something that would be uplifting. But my kids were right there with me. They were safe. They were part of my unit. We had company come out and Furniers, Alice Cooper.
Oh yes.
He was a young teenager, and they liked basketball, so we would watch the sons play basketball, and he was more interested in me because I would get excited over the game. So, you know, there was a lot of other things besides just being focused completely on that. There was other.
Yeah, you made your life here.
Yeah.
You talked about, I mean, obviously you came from a very different lifestyle when you moved here. Like, how did you get to the point of feeling like this is home, this is my community, from coming from such a different background?
I don't know how I did it, but I did. This was home. This was my home. Even I cried more when we left here the first time when we moved away. Dan was sick, and we needed to get away for his health, and I cried. I didn't want to leave. This was my home, and we made our path through the other way. I mean, we moved, like I said, we moved to California. We moved to Lindsay first because Tony and Lydia lived there. That was his brother, and we moved right down the street, and that's where we worshiped for a little while. And then business opened up for him to do construction in Modesto, so we moved up to Modesto, and we lived there, and that's where we went to church most of the time that we were over there. And I had my forever home over there too. We had a beautiful home. You know, I mean, it was if that's what my life was, a beautiful home, I had it.
Yeah.
But that wasn't what was, I mean, it was nice while I had it. It served its purpose, and now it's time to leave. We're coming back to San Carlos. That house was nothing. Home was here. In my heart, home was here.
Yeah.
And that's where I wanted to be.
So now you've lived here for 63 years and you're still chugging along?
Yeah.
I mean, do you look back at your life? Do you ever think about, like, the highlights of it versus things that you would do differently? Is there anything like that you ever think back?
No. If I had to do it all over again, if I had to live my life all over again, the part of San Carlos would be the same.
Right.
There's a lot of things I probably would have changed or done a little bit different in life, just decisions that I made or whatever during my whole life. I probably wouldn't have, because it wasn't perfect. So I probably would have, if I had the chance to go back and do some things over, I probably would do them differently. But coming to San Carlos would be exactly the same, because it's been a blessing to be here. So I told Dan, you know, here he is on his deathbed, and he's worried about me. I said, don't worry about me. The brother said I could stay here as long as I want, so I'm okay. This is my home, and he was happy that this was my home. And he said, when he was at the hospital, when the doctor said, we'll give you 2 to 6 months, but we're not God, she said. You know, he can do other things, but medically you've got 2 to 6 months. He was 5.5 months in hospice. So they were pretty close on their diagnosis. But during that time, he came to church. I'd wheel him in a wheelchair. We'd sit in the back. He blessed the baby from the wheelchair. You know?
Wow.
I mean, this was his life. He says, San Carlos is my life. When I leave this world, I want to leave from here. So the nurse at the hospital, she called, set up hospice for us and everything. So he could have hospice. here at the mission.
Wow.
So when he left this world, he left it from where he felt his life was.
Do you have any advice or counsel you would give to either our wonderful brother and sister here, or any young person who's just wondering about what does God have for them? What is their life going to be at that stage of life?
Yeah, I would just say that if you have a desire to work for the Lord, and you pray earnestly, He will answer you. But you have to remember too that Satan's going to put stumbling blocks there, and so you have to stick firm. Dan had to stick firm that we were moving to San Carlos when he was offered that job.
To build up.
He couldn't say, well, I'll take that job and then I'll move. No. The job doesn't mean anything. God said move, so you move. You do. He opened up the way for us to move, so move. Don't let the stumbling block hinder you from doing. It's like you're not going to find work. He found work. He found a better job. It doesn't always come easy. There's sometimes that you have to make a hard choice of what's going to happen. And Satan's going to try, if you're going to work for the Lord, Satan's going to try to discourage you. And he's going to it's not going to be, it's not going to be all roses. You're going to have some thorns along the way. So, like I said before, we had serious sickness. We had surgeries. I lost a daughter. We had a lot of trials, a lot of heartaches, a lot of other things that normal people get. I mean, that's normal. Just because God calls you to do a work doesn't mean that He's going to make you
invincible
up here.
Yeah.
You're going to have the same problems that everybody else has.
Mm-hmm. Something that God has put on my mind from the moment I got here was that, and this is kind of the thing I've been saying all along, and it's exactly what you just said, which I'm very thankful that there's been a lot of beautiful testimonies that I relate to very strongly, but is that life is life. We're going to go through hardships, and I would rather go through the hardships where I'm called to be than go through hardships just trying to live my life wherever I want to be. Yeah. And so I really relate to your testimony there, and I think for a young person listening, that's can be a really challenging thing to get themselves to that point of realizing that life is not perfect, but I want to be used, and I'm willing to go wherever God has for me. Has me. So when they are getting to that point where they're trying to make that mental shift, I think just something that I'm curious about, maybe I don't know how much longer we're going to do this, but one of the things that I am curious about is at what point did you start to notice that, like, okay, I feel like God's increased my courage, my strength here, and like those trips to the store with your mom no longer bothered you anymore? Or is that something that you always just lived with?
I think you always hold some of that. I was going through a struggle, and there was so much going on, and I would look out the windows, and I would see all the old lumber that we were trying to save to use because we were.
Are you talking about recently?
Huh?
Is this more recently?
Yeah, this is just recently, like a couple years, a year. All the weeds growing up in the back, and Dan was sick for quite a while, and so a lot of the little things that he did to keep things up was not getting done. So there was a lot more repair that needed to be done here than normally. But I would look out and I would see I wasn't seeing the beauty anymore. I was seeing the weeds out back, the old lumber that was laying out there, all this stuff, and it was just breaking my heart. I was so discouraged and so just out of it. And things just were not going right. They just were not right. And so I was feeling that I was in a place where I hadn't been I don't remember when I was so discouraged and so out of order. I just couldn't. And so I'm looking out the window, and God's telling me, look up to the mountains instead of the troubles that are around. The troubles around you, they'll take care of themselves. They'll do their things, but look to the mountains. And what started me with looking to the mountains was when we were going to Pine Top for the dedication, Sister Jackie and Sister Sharon came and stayed here for a few days before and a few days after. And they couldn't get over how beautiful the mountains were. You know, I would go, Sharon would come out of the bedroom and she'd say, oh, those mountains out there. She says, I've just been looking out the window and those mountains are so beautiful. The mountains out here are just so beautiful. I would be so tempted to move out here just for these beautiful mountains. Jackie would come in the other room. Jackie's sitting there with the back door open. She's sitting on the step there. Oh, these mountains out here are so beautiful. Where are the mountains? All this trash around here, all these weeds, all this, you know. And God's telling me, don't look at all that stuff. Trouble, disappointments. I think it was probably harder for me that time because I was by myself. Dan wasn't there. We weren't sharing the problem together. I didn't have him to share the load with me, and it was getting me down. But God told me to look to the mountains. Don't look around. So I can't look around here to see how much trash has to be picked up and cleaned. That's just part of life. That's part of life, and it's going to be there. But you got to look to the mountains, and God will see us through.
What's really interesting is that before Anna got to Say Benito a month ago, you mentioned how Satan puts stumbling blocks in your family's way. And every day because I had to come to Say Benito to work before they got there. And it was hiccups, things happen, whatever. And God, every morning when I was praying, the thought came to my mind, look up to the mountains. Look to the hills, look to the mountains around you. So you explaining that further helps me better understand what he was telling me, is that all these troubles around you, they're going to be there. Just stay focused on the mark, right? What you're going towards. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
And you're a team.
Yes.
You know, like Regina said to me when Dan passed away, she says, well, are you going to stay at the reservation? I says, yeah, I'm going to stay at the reservation. She says, but that was Dad's work. I says, but 65 years ago, in front of the minister and before God, I promised to be his wife. And he promised to be my husband. We became one. So we're one. You're one now. So your troubles, you share with him, and he'll help you carry the load. And his troubles, he'll share with you, and you help him carry the load. Don't go this way. Go together. Because you'll face some things, and she'll face some things, but share them together. Carry them together. And they aren't heavy then.
That's cool.
Life's not easy. You know, Dan and I were together 65 years, and it wasn't a perfect 65 years. We had our hard times. We had our, our ups and downs, and we faced everything that every other person faces. Like I said before, we had our sicknesses, we had our discouragements, we had our disappointments, we had our broken hearts, we had, things happen in life. And it's not just the two of you, it wasn't just Dan and me, there was a lot of things that happened around us that created issues. And so we had to face all the issues together, and that's...
Well, even thinking about you're describing, like you said, we get so focused on all that stuff around us, and we lose sight of the bigger picture. And I was just thinking about one of the testimonies from VBS that I've heard of one of the kids, and I'm sure you've heard this, that he was like playing at home after VBS, and he was sitting on a trash can, and he fell into the trash can with his knees like against his body, right?
Yeah.
And he couldn't breathe. And so he was like, I know at VBS I learned, and if I misremember it, you can correct me, but I know I learned that you can pray to God and he'll help you when you're in trouble. Just this simple truth. And all of a sudden, he's like praying, okay, God, like I can't breathe, please help me. And then he gets pulled out by his two arms, and it's his grandpa, and he's like, how did you know to get me? Because he was like fully in the trash can. He's like, I heard you calling for me. And he's like, I couldn't breathe, I didn't call for you. But he was like, oh, God answered my prayer. Mm-hmm. And I think something just as simple as that is like, there's a kid now who knows that there's a God out there who sees me and knows me, loves me, cares about me, and wants a relationship with me. Now that's something that's going to impact that person for the rest of their life, and who knows how they can impact other people with that. And so even despite all those challenges that all of us are facing, it's like if your life can somehow help someone else know God, then to me that's like this mountain that through all, even though there's these difficult things, it's like yet God has this greater picture that just makes all that stuff like doesn't seem to matter as much.
Yeah. We have my nickname here, a lot of people call me Grandma D. So that makes me feel loved. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel that I've accomplished something. And I was thinking about it the other day because Tina used to work at Bash's up there. And one of the young girls that she worked with called me Grandma D. And when she worked at Bash, after Tina passed for a long time, she moved away now. She's not there anymore. But every time I would walk in Bash's door, I would hear, Grandma D! She would spot me from over there where she was working, and she would call. So everybody in the beginning of the first part of Bash's knew I was Grandma D, you know. So this is home. I'm part of the group.
For me, it makes me want to be more intentional about like fasting and praying about, okay, God, what do you want me to do for you? Not just getting wrapped up in what's my job and what's my house and all these other things that we get wrapped up on. And before we wrap up, I know there was a scripture you mentioned that was meaningful to you, if you wanted to share that.
Yeah, I was telling you before, you said, you were going to ask, one of the questions that's normal to ask is a favorite scripture. Mm-hmm. And I was going to be smart and say, oh, my favorite scripture is the Bible and Book of Mormon, because all of it is good. But we have coffee cups that have scriptures on them. And this morning when I brought the coffee cup out for one of the coffee cups, it had Philippians 4:13 on it. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And then when I looked that up in the Bible, when I looked the scripture up in the Bible so I could just read a little bit before and a little bit after it, it referred to John 15:5, which says, for without him we can do nothing. Mm-hmm. So if we don't have his strength, we've got to rely on God, because without him we can do nothing.
Yeah.
And he will give us the strength that we need.
Yes.
That's beautiful.
Like, so you might get weak. We might get weak. Our knees might start bending, but he comes through.
When we're weak, he is strong, right?
Yeah.
So thank you, everyone who tuned in and watched this, and may God bless you. That's it. I don't feel like doing subscribe.
So my other famous saying is, for 18 years I was Reverend Hoffman's daughter, and I was seen and not heard. For the next 65 years I was Brother Dan's wife. I was seen and not heard. And I haven't shut up since.